at a time when news consumption is at a never before high and in-your-face journalism the norm, a study of women journalists is both relevant and necessary. Journalism is a field in India where women have made a significant progress in the past few decades, be it the coverage of wars, political events or even calamities. Hello and welcome to Women Influencers Talk Show. My name is Sadaf and I'm so honored to interview Kumkum Chadda today on our show, who is a fearless and bold journalist and has been associated with the iconic newspaper Hindustan Times, a newspaper which is read by 3.7 million readers all across India. But before we dive into the interview, if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, please do so and be a part of our community. Hello ma'am, welcome to Women Influencers Talk Show.
Hi Sadaf, thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you. Now everybody in the media fraternity knows you as a fearless and bold journalist, but I think in order to understand someone, it is very important to know something about their past. So how was your childhood like?
Childhood was normal. Mother strict, father liberal. Grew up normally, went to Air Force school. Lot of discipline instilled, and with discipline, a lot of nationalism instilled. I remember we were during one of the wars. We had friends whose fathers were fighting on the battlefield. So that whole thing of saving the nation, fighting for the country, loving the country, growing up with that spirit of nationalism has always remained. And I've always felt a gap, which is that in most households, the spirit of nationalism, or in most Indians, I think, the spirit of nationalism is not inculcated. And I think that's a very, very big flaw. That is why most of us think of ourselves, we think of our families, we think of our parents, we think of our children, but we do not think of the nation. Nation first or nation there at all in our mindsets, I don't think exist. So I was fortunate that I went to an Air Force school. And I remember, and I mentioned this in my book, that I was a rice eater and there was rationing of food grains. And there used to be limited amount of rice which used to be given to every household. And my mother, knowing that I do not eat wheat, would buy rice in the black market at a premium so that I could eat it. And when I came to know that, I gave up eating rice altogether till the war didn't end. So we grew up with that. I'm not saying this as a praise. I'm just saying that in an Air Force school or in the environment I grew up, nationalism was very, very important. And even now, even when my son and I are watching television, for example, and the national anthem is played and sometimes you feel lazy, my son is the first one to say, national anthem is playing and you haven't got up and you haven't stood up. So I think to me, that is something which my childhood gave me. And that is something I really value.
That's so true. And I think this will be the takeaway of this episode. Instilling nationalism and good citizenship is something which should not be the responsibility of a few people, but should be adopted and imbibed by all people at large. Did you have somebody whom you really looked up to in your childhood?
Looking up to people, I have really not done. I have not had any heroes or superheroes. I have not really... I have admired people, but I have not gone into that hero worship phase. I remember even taking autographs was not something I ever did. You know, I did once when Farooq Engineer, the cricketer, came to the school and everyone was taking autographs and I did too. But over the years, even in my journalism, when I've interviewed people and I've interviewed celebrities, I've had the good fortune of rubbing shoulders with important, powerful, influential people. I have never had the need either to take an autograph or to take a picture. One person or one photograph I've always had is Rabindranath Tagore. And that is because I've always liked his writings.
All right. So how and when were you drawn to the world of writing?
I was actually not drawn to it. Honestly, it was an accident. And I can say it was an accident because I had never planned to be a writer. I didn't know I could be one. Till I started actually writing, I had never written before. I had never even written in a school magazine or a college magazine. So I'm not one of those aspirational writers who wanted to be a writer and finally became one. I stumbled into journalism, and from journalism, I grew, as most journalists do, into a writer and later author. I did my master's, and after my master's, as I was waiting for the results, I was looking at some summer courses which I could do. Stumbled on journalism. It was the shortest course going. It was 3 months at that time, or 6 months, I don't remember. Enrolled, and that is the time, and the course I was doing also had a paper, a newspaper, a tabloid kind of newspaper, and we were supposed to write there as assignments. So when I did my first assignment and it got printed and I saw my name in print, that was the magic which got on. And more than what I had written, it was seeing my name in print which I got glued to, and then went into serious journalism.
Okay, I read somewhere that small things add up to huge results. I mean, no matter where you draw your inspiration from, or no matter what triggers your passion, you should just flow with the times and move ahead. Ma'am, you are known as someone with a pen of knives. What would you like to say about this title?
The title that I have a pen of knives was given to me by Mr. Khushwant Singh. He wrote this when he did the preface of my first book, I think. Another title he gave me was My Being Oriana Fallaci. I took both as a compliment because, one, it was very flattering, and secondly, it came from none other than Mr. Khushwant Singh, who of course to me was a father figure, but also very well known. And at that stage, and I'm saying 25 years ago, for a young reporter or a young journalist to be noticed, to be complimented by someone of the stature of Mr. Khushwant Singh was a big deal.
That's great, ma'am. Now, you have also authored quite a few books which have been widely praised and also reviewed. Is there any one in particular which is closest to your heart and life, and why?
I've done 4 books. The first was a compilation of interviews which were published in Hindustan Times. The book was called The Crucifixion, and it had political interviews. It was followed by the second book, which was a book on the Indian jails and the condition of prisoners and the condition of prisons and the corruption which goes in. My third book was again a compilation which was called The 10-Year File, and that was a compilation of some of my articles which had been published and reviewed, liked, commented on in Hindustan Times. My last book was published last year. It's called The Marigold Story, Indira Gandhi and Others. And that, I would say, is closest to my heart as of now. I enjoyed doing that book because that was a trip down memory lane, recording events, bringing to life people who were important, who changed, influenced the destiny of the country in different spheres, and not necessarily politicians. So yes, it is closest to my heart, and it got very good reviews.
Oh yes, it's an amazing read. It just takes you down the memory lane. The anecdotes, the narration of the story, it's all amazing. And I would request all of you to go and pick up a copy for yourself too. Ma'am, you have specialized not only in political writing, but also on crime reporting and gender issues. Please share your experience on that.
When you say I have specialized in crime reporting and gender reporting, let me tell you, that's the life of a reporter. You don't choose, at least initially, and when you're a reporter, you don't choose your areas of specialization. You're just thrown into them. When we were reporters, the first beat which was given was crime. Because I think the principle was, if you survived the rough and tough road of crime or reportage, you are able to withstand the hardships, if I may use the word, of journalism. I remember I had covered the killing of the Chopra children, the two young kids who were killed in Buddha Jayanti Park. And I remember going to the mortuary and, relatives wailing, crying. And within that, to ask questions was very inhuman. But then your job as a reporter pushed you to do that. Gender, when you go to the bureau, you tend to cover ministries. I did the social sector for a long time. I wrote about women. So that is how one graduated. But if you were to really talk of specialization, then I think I'm a hardcore political reporter. In that sense. Who has done crime reporting as an essential? Who has done gender? Who has done the social sector? Who's done education? Because it's all part of the game.
Okay, so according to you, what areas of reporting in our country needs the most fearless reporters?
Fearlessness has to be a journalist's basic trait. You have to have the grit and the determination to say what is right. So I don't think it's beat specific. I don't think it's subject specific. I think it is the basic principle, if you want to be a journalist, that you need to be fearless. Yes, sensitivities, yes. If you're reporting on communal events, sensitivity of how that would impact a particular community at the macro level is important. If you're covering a suicide, if you're covering a rape, the sensitivities have to be there, sure. But you cannot, sensitivity and fearlessness cannot be mixed up. You can be sensitive and yet be fearless and say things maybe in a manner that even while they hit hard, there is a softening of the blow. But your facts can't be diluted.
That's a very valid thing you have just said. We quickly mix up things and immediately pass our own judgment about who is an insensitive reporter, who is fearless, who is not reporting fine. We just don't understand the situation, the moment in which the reporting is being done, and we are completely ignorant of the fact and we quickly pass our own judgments. That's not really right. Now, being a bold writer comes with a price and also had its ill effects. What would you like to say about that?
Probably now one feels it comes with a price. I don't know. I can't really answer that because there are risks you take, but then that's part of the profession. Yes, you upset a lot of people, but I do not believe in what most people like to practice now, pretend to say that, oh, we can't write this because the government will get angry. Even if they don't say it, there is a certain slant. I think if you are a good journalist, if your credibility is intact, then even if they get angry, they will need you. I remember I was covering Prime Minister Morarji Desai, and I was doing a series at that time which was called Day in the Life of the Janata government, the ministers, and I was covering the Prime Minister. And his secretary told me that you can't go into his breakfast room where he has breakfast. And for me, that was an essential. So I ignored what he told me and I went in. I asked Mr. Morarji Desai, I said, can we come in? And he said, of course. So we went and covered it, took photographs. When I came out, his secretary was livid. And he said, by the time you go back to your work, you will be out of your job. I went, I did my story, I published my story. So now those kind of threats I have gone through several times, and mostly from politicians who would often ring up my chairman, who was the late Mr. K.K. Birla, very gracious. Once did he say, do not write. He was also under a lot of pressure during the Janata government. And if you read the preface of my book, The Marigold Story, I mentioned this. But my job was not under threat. The maximum he would say is, be careful. And I must say that my newspaper, Hindustan Times, where I worked all my life, has supported me. I have never had a situation where my story, if it has been factual, which it mostly has been pulled out simply because of a pressure from some politician ringing up. And I can say this with complete honesty. It has never happened.
Okay, but what about the repercussions? Did you experience it after writing any article of yours?
Repercussions I've faced, as I just gave you this example of Morarji Desai. There have been several others. I remember, I think Vinod Pandey. He was the cabinet secretary in Mr. VP Singh's government. And he was a friend of mine, a good friend of mine. And I was one day said, I want to do an interview with you. And he said, sure. So we did this interview. It was the first ever interview given by a cabinet secretary to any newspaper, because cabinet secretary never gives interviews. He gave it to me. I wrote it, discussed the points with him, also told him what I was doing. So he was on board. Once the interview was published, it created a ruckus. There were questions asked. There was a question in Parliament. And I don't remember. He was definitely in trouble. I don't remember if he had to resign because of that. I'm not quite sure. So so when I tried to speak to him, he of course didn't come to the phone. Those were not days of cell phones. They were days of fixed lines. I went to his house and he stayed in near Dyal Singh College at Bharati Nagar. And I went to his house and I rang the bell and he came out to open the door. And when he saw me, he slammed the door at me and said, I want to have nothing to do with you. I did lose a friendship, but I was not guilty because I didn't betray him. He was fully aware that the interview was going to be done. He was fully aware that it would be published. What he was not aware was the repercussions it would have. Many instances like that. Many instances. I remember Mr. Chaudhary Charan Singh. He was the Home Minister then. I was interviewing him. And I asked him one or two questions. And he was a very short-tempered man. And the first question not the first, but one of the questions I asked him, I did it a little politely. He didn't understand. And by the time I asked him supplementaries, he was so upset that he said, who is your employer? And I said, Mr. K.K. Birla. So he said, please leave and never come back to my house. It was in his house. Never come back. And you need to be trained in, how to ask questions or whatever. And of course, by the time I reached, and this used to happen very often, by the time I would reach office, someone would have called Mr. Birla, who would be summoning me and saying, okay, what did you do this time? But he was very, very fond of me, always supported me. We did publish the interview. And Chaudhary Charan Singh, I remember, swore and said that it would be the end of my journalism. This was in the 70s. I have survived it. I have not been stopped in my organization. I still continued doing stories. But yes, I've had several threats from politicians more than any other. I've been asked to get out more often than I've been asked to come in. That's true.
Wow, this is like a Pandora box of events that is opening in front of us, up close and personal from you. Hats off to your resilience and passion to do work. Now, among all this news coverage and reporting, did your personal life ever get affected?
I don't think so. Because one, I got into this profession very young. I got into the profession before the so-called family life started. So, I was very focused. This profession was 24/7. I enjoyed every minute. Even now, after 30 plus years or 3 decades, I enjoy every minute of whatever little I do now. I used to earlier be a beat reporter, used to work, push stories. Now we do more commentative stuff, cover Parliament. So it's different. But I have enjoyed it. And I think my profession absorbed me so completely that maybe marriage was on the back burner. I remember my mother always wanted me to get married when I was 17 or 18 or 19 or whatever. Got this job, thoroughly enjoyed it. And I remember and those were conservative times when women working was not what many families would accept. So if it came to the question of giving up my job because I had to get married, I would say no. If it was the question, those days also well-settled boys were abroad. So it meant quitting and going, and I would say no. So in that sense, if you were to say, because of my job, I said no to many proposals, yes, I did. Otherwise, no. My mother would worry very often. I remember when I used to cover jails. When I was doing this book, I used to go to the Tihar jail very often. She didn't know about it because she would have never allowed it. So I would go, and I remember one of the prisoners. He was in the bank van robbery case, in the Sunil Batra, that famous Sunil Batra case, and I wrote about this in the preface of my book again. Vipin Jaggi. He was released, and I had to interview him because I was doing this book. And he said, now it is also difficult in those times to meet a prisoner where he was out of jail. So I said, okay, why don't you come home? Because I always felt home was safe. I could call people. And so I called him. I said, why don't you come home? And he was an educated chap. The mistake he committed was when he came, of course he was dressed up very well, he came from a good family, that he brought red roses. And my mother saw, and she didn't know who he was. I could have never told her I'm getting a prisoner home or someone who's been out of jail. That was out. So I said, well, there's someone who's coming who I have to interview, etc. So when she saw these roses, she called me aside and said, who the hell is this man? And I could never lie to her. I would live in a situation of half-truth, but I never lied. So then I told her, I said, well, he's involved in a case, etc., etc. And then she said, I want him out of my house in the next 5 minutes. I, of course, pleaded, and I said, now that he's here, let me do it. It'll be one last time. And I did manage to interview him. But so I've had situations like that, where I've been in a situation of half-truth, not told her the kind of people I'm meeting, crime, never told her, jails, never told her. Of course, when it would be printed, and she was not highly educated, English was not her language, so she didn't read too much. My father did, and he always admired what I did, always encouraged me. And several times he would come and tell me if I didn't write on a particular day, and I didn't write every day, but you did write 4 or 5 times a week. And if he didn't find my article or my story in the paper, he'd say, oh, you didn't write today? And it was like, a principal coming and saying, you missed your homework. So I've lived in those kind of parental situations where my father's always been proud of what I did. My mother didn't know how much I did in that sense. And she was always a critic. So she always thought, and which was right, I improved a lot because of her criticism, not of my work, but generally in life.
I'm sure a lot of women will relate to what you have just said, and they don't have to be from the media fraternity only. Now, as a woman, what kind of challenges did you feel in this male-dominating profession?
Okay, this challenge of a male-dominated profession or whatever, honestly, I didn't find any. And I can say that with a straight face. To many times, it worked as an advantage. It worked as an advantage because as a woman, you could walk into many places that your male colleagues couldn't. I remember, and I can give you 2 instances. General Zia was visiting for a cricket match in Jaipur. I had taken permission from and got my interview cleared that I would be interviewing General Zia. It was cleared at the highest level. But when I went to Jaipur, and on that cricket field, there were lots of restrictions. So whatever permissions I had or whatever, they were not by the people on the ground or the local police or the local intelligence people. They knew nothing and they said, no, we can't, we are sorry. I sneaked in to the dressing room of the cricketers. And I remember, I don't now remember which the cricketers were, because I was not such a cricket fan. But because I was a lady, it was, I told them, I said, listen, my job is at stake. I have to do this. Please let me. So they smuggled me in. And I was suddenly on the field, just outside that dressing area. I was on the field. And there was General Zia, who was had to walk past. So I was at an vantage position. And because, I mean, I'm sure if it was a male person, the police would have pushed him out. But because I was there, I had this confident air about me. They were not sure what was happening because I was in the VVVIP area. So they were not sure who I was. So nobody really approached me and said, who are you, or checked anything. And then while General Zia was walking, I remember I shouted out and I said, General, I'm so-and-so. And I was to interview you. And he turned and said, yes, of course. And because the Pakistan embassy officials were with him, so I was taken, and then I sat with him all through the cricket match. And suddenly, from being a non-entity, I became a VVIP. And then, of course, I did my interview and whatever. The point I'm making here is, I don't think a male, maybe they would have, but I think I had an advantage because I was a lady reporter. I remember when I had to interview Rajiv Gandhi. It was at the AICC, interviews were not being granted, nothing was happening. I went, I stood in the crowd. It was 8 o'clock in the morning, 7:30 in the morning. He walked into the gate, he drove into the gate. And as he got out, and there was a lot of security, so there was no way you could just go up to him. So as he got out of the car and was going to go inside the AICC, I called out and I said, Mr. Gandhi. So I think as a lady reporter, you're able to do those things.
Right. So do you think the risk of speaking your mind has become more now, or is it relatively easier?
I don't know what is the meaning of risk of speaking your mind. I don't understand this terminology. It has never been there as far as, and I'm not saying as far as I'm concerned, I think in our generation of reporters, and I can name several of my women colleagues, where risk of speaking one's mind, forget. The word risk was not there. Even in physical, when you were, I remember when I would go to riot infested areas or areas which could be risky, I would often tell my colleagues, Bhaiya, wapis, I don't know if I'm coming back, but please write a good obit for me. Now, when you talk of risks, we were traveling with Mr. Rajiv Gandhi. That was his first visit abroad, and I was part of the thing. And we were coming on our way back. I remember we were having dinner on the flight, and a colleague of mine came and said, one of the engines has failed and there is panic. So I panicked and I rang up my colleague who was sleeping next to me, and I woke him up and I said, listen, I believe one of the engines is this thing, it's risky. So he laughed and said, listen, this is the Prime Minister's aircraft, nothing is going to happen. So you also have that sense of security when you're traveling with VIPs. But yes, in case of Rajiv Gandhi, the day he was unfortunately assassinated, my photographer and I were supposed to go with him. And we were very tired because we had covered him in UP. So when he went there, we just opted out. And had we gone with him, and we had covered, both of us, covered Rajiv Gandhi so closely that his entire security would always allow us close proximity to him. Very close proximity. We were never stopped. And I can tell you that if we had gone that day, I probably would not have been under so much risk, because as a reporter, I could always step back and keep a distance and still report. But my photographer would have been absolutely close to him to take close-ups, to take this thing. And he would have become, I'm sure, a victim if we had gone. Narrow escape. But when you're going or not going, you don't think of the risk. You think of your story and you go for your story. And that, I think, is not only for me. I think that's for every reporter.
Sure, I completely agree with you. Now, as a veteran journalist, what advice would you like to give to all the aspiring women who want to opt for a career in journalism?
Those who are opting for a career in journalism, let me tell you, it is not glamour. They look at visual media today and say, oh, let's do journalism because it's a lot of hard work. It's a drill. It's enjoyable. There is a magic in seeing your byline. And I say, because I'm a print journalist, seeing your byline in print, it's a magic. That magic stays with you. The kind of influence you have on wherever you have written gives you a lot of thrill. It gives you a kick. It is your drive. It pushes you to keep at it. But it's not a bed of roses. I mean, let's not think that there is no hard work. There is a lot of hard work. So my advice would be, don't go and do journalism simply because you think it's glamorous. Glamour and all come much, much later. It's a lot of hard work. And if you're prepared to take the risks, if you're prepared to work hard, if you're prepared to be objective, and if you're prepared to stand tall, do it. Don't, to quote L.K. Advani, when they were asked to bend, they crawled. If you have to go in that slot, don't even touch it. Don't touch journalism.
Right. Here again, I would like to say that there are no shortcuts to success. I mean, fame, money, all these are byproducts. They will eventually come. But what is required is your focus and a clear vision. Let's talk about your recent book, Marigold Story. What it is about and what was the idea behind writing this book?
I think I had too many incidents in my mind. There was too much I had covered and I felt they should be recorded. But I must say, and if you read the preface, you will know again, I must say there were a lot of my younger colleagues when I would tell them stories of, this is what happened, that is what happened. And I would realize that they don't know anything of the era when we covered. And for them, it's history repeated. There was a lot about them personally which people did not know. Whether it was Mrs. Indira Gandhi, whether it was Amitabh Bachchan, whether it was Smita Patil, whether it was Rajiv Gandhi, whether it was Sanjay Gandhi. I mean, your generation, Sadaf, would not even know who or what Sanjay Gandhi was, So I felt that I needed to put it down. I thought all that I have covered, the events, the people, they should all come. I should bring them back to life.
Well, I must tell you that I can vouch for this book. It's an amazing read. This year, ma'am, you were also awarded with the Mahatma Gandhi Award for Journalism and also Inspiring Woman 2020 Award for Journalism. What would you like to say about that?
Yes, this year I was conferred the Mahatma Gandhi Award and also the Women Influencer. Always nice when you're conferred an award. Makes you feel good. Makes you feel relevant. And I can only thank the people the jury who handpicked me for these. And you do feel when you get these awards, especially towards the end of your career or I'm not even in the mid-career, I'm towards the end of my career, that your work of the past has had an impact. It has resonated, that after so many years, whatever you wrote, say, several years ago, it has had a macro impact and is considered worthy for an award. So I think it only reassures one, and it reassures me that, okay, whatever I have done, it has not been time wasted.
Sure, ma'am. Now, you are also the founder member of the Indian Women's Press Corps. What are the functionalities of this body and how did it came into being?
Apart from being the founder member of the Indian Women's Press Corps, I am also on the chair events with the Foreign Correspondents Club of South Asia, and I'm also on the Executive Committee of the Editors Guild of India, as also convener of the Program Committee of Editors Guild of India. Now that you ask about the Indian Women's Press Corps, it started with 18 of us who decided that there is no club for women journalists. So we said we must have a place of our own where women journalists can converge, can talk, can discuss. It takes up issues of journalists, but generally it is a place where you go, you chill, you meet people. There is a very nice lunchroom there. And we do lots of programs, we do lots of seminars which have relevance to the profession, which have relevance to journalists and national issues. So that's what it is. That's how the Indian Women's Press Corps is.
Okay. Lastly, what was the idea and motivation behind starting Quill Quest, the media institute that you have founded this year?
This institute, Quill Quest, and my tagline is an institute for sharp minds. I started it during the lockdown. Work was less, of course, we were doing a lot of online, but I thought that it would be interesting, and I've always loved teaching. I've been on the guest faculty of the Delhi University colleges, including Lady Shri Ram College, Delhi College of Art and Commerce. So I've always loved teaching. So I said, why not, start teaching journalism to those, and writing skills and communication to those who want to enhance their skills. So I designed a few courses. One is for journalists, one is for non-journalists, one is to enhance communication skills, and one is for authors struggling to write books, from even how to write a proposal to the publishing stage. What I would want to do is that the girl child, we would like to give scholarships. We would also do free education for them, which is of course at a later stage. So that I think it will be my contribution as a journalist to be able to give back what I have learned in 35 years.
Well, all I can say is that it was such an enriching experience for me talking to you, knowing more about you, your stories. It was definitely a takeaway for me, and I'm sure for the viewers as well. I would like to say a big thank you to you for coming on our show and giving us your precious time. Thank you so much once again. And before I say goodbye to all you beautiful people, I would request you to subscribe to our channel and become a part of our ever-growing big community. So till we meet next time again, take care, stay safe, bye-bye.